Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at something from Papua New Guinea, a legal tool that was supposed to empower communities and protect their land. But what happens when a promise on paper ends up doing the exact opposite, becoming a tool for destruction? Let's get into it. All right, so first things first, what are we even talking about here? The key term is an incorporated land group, or you'll hear it called an ILG. So think of it like this. It's a way to take a traditional clan, a local community, and give it an official legal identity. Suddenly, in the eyes of the government, they're a legal entity with certain powers, protections, and, of course, responsibilities. Now, the original idea, the whole reason ILGs were created, was actually pretty powerful. It was meant to help local clans get their land back. We're talking about ancestral lands that had been lost, a lot of it during the colonial era for things like plantations. So this was supposed to be a tool for justice, plain and simple, a way to give back what was taken. So let's start with how this was all supposed to work. This was created to be a tool for landowners. But, well, that promise was betrayed. Over the past 30 years or so, that original purpose got twisted, completely turned on its head. It ended up doing the exact opposite of what it was designed for.
So you gotta ask, what went wrong? How on earth does a tool created to empower people become a way to take everything from them? How does a shield for the community become a weapon used against them?
And this right here, this lays it all out. On the one hand, you have what was intended, empowering groups, strengthening their hold on their land, protecting their ownership. But then look at the actual use. ILGs just became a handy way for companies and the government to figure out who to talk to for big resource projects. Logging, mining. It became a way to get consent and a system to dish out royalties. And look, this isn't some minor bureaucratic hiccup. The misuse of ILGs has been absolutely disastrous for communities and their land all across the country. We're talking real, devastating consequences. Okay, so let's dig into how this system actually broke down. What were the weak points that allowed all this to happen? It really comes down to three big things. First, ILGs started being used as a backdoor way to claim land ownership, even though they were never designed for that. Second, the whole process of setting up an ILG, it's just riddled with problems, often pushed by outside interests. And third, those problems are being exploited to basically alienate communities from their own land, sometimes forever. And when you dig into those poor practices, you see a total mess. You've got this proliferation of ILGs with people creating splinter groups just to get a slice of the royalty payments. The government department in charge just wasn't keeping up. And then you have educated elites creating these things in secret, The rest of the community might not even know it's happening. Add in how complex and expensive it is to do proper mapping in remote places, and it's a recipe for disaster. So with all these failures, you have to ask, who's actually responsible here? Whose job is it to make sure the right landowners are identified before anything happens? Well, the PNG Supreme Court couldn't have been clearer. They said the duty is on the state or anyone else who wants to come onto customary land. It's their job to figure out who the true and correct owners are. They have to do that work first before anything else. And that failure of responsibility, it led to one of the biggest land scandals in the nation's history. It's known as the Special Agriculture Business Lease Saga, or SABL for short. So what happened? Well, through this SABL scheme, using ILGs that were either fake or just didn't represent the real community, over 5.5 million hectares of land were signed away. That number is just staggering. And to put that into perspective, that 5.5 million hectares, that's 12%. 12% of all customary land in the entire country, leased away, in many cases for 99 years, basically stolen from the next generation. Okay, but behind these huge, abstract numbers are real people, real families, real communities. So let's talk about the impact this has on them, because it's deeply personal. You see, there's a fundamental clash here. In a customary setting, you have respect for elders, decisions are made by consensus, you talk things through. But the ILG structure, it imposes this Western-style democratic system with voting and a management committee, and that committee can make decisions that exclude other members. It completely undermines the traditional way of doing things. And this gets especially damaging in matrilineal societies, places where land rights traditionally pass down through the women. The ILG system, with its formal committees that are often dominated by men, can literally shift that power, stripping women of their ancestral control over the land.
All right, so given how bad things got, you'd think someone would try to fix it, right? Well, there have been attempts, but the real question is, can the damage actually be undone?
So back in 2009, they passed some major reforms to try and tighten things up. The new rules were meant to stop people from creating all these splinter ILGs. Members could only join one. They tried to increase community engagement and add new rules for things like accounting to fight corruption. The big question, though, did it work?
Well, even the courts don't seem convinced. This quote says it all, really. Despite the new laws, the courts are still seeing a ton of cases involving ILGs, and that suggests that, in practice, nothing has really changed.
And that leaves us with some really big questions. Like, will the Department of Lands ever get the resources it needs to actually enforce the new rules? How do you even enforce financial accountability in some of these super remote places? And those gender reforms? Is having 2 women on a 6-member committee really enough? Does it go far enough? It makes you wonder, can a system this flawed ever truly be fixed? Which really brings us to the heart of the matter. This whole story is a cautionary tale, and it leaves you with this one big uncomfortable question. When a system fails the very people it was built to protect, is just trying to reform it ever really enough?